I'm joined today with Pastor Michael Clary. So we're going to play our opener and we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. So hang tight, folks.
Welcome to the Center for Baptist Leadership podcast, hosted by William Wolfe. Our mission is to cultivate courageous and biblical Baptist leadership for the 21st century. We aim to revitalize the Southern Baptist Convention from within, defend it from those who seek its destruction, and serve as a better Baptist voice in the public square.
So, Michael, that opener, you may know the man who made it, which is Tim Bouchon. It's a special remix of Soldiers in Christ in Truth Arrayed by Tim Bouchon with his incredible guitar riffs. I love it, man. But hey, Michael, thanks so much for joining us on the Center for Baptist Leadership podcast live stream. This is, I think, your first time coming on, though you certainly have written for us quite a few times. So astute and intelligent readers will be familiar with your name for sure. But go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do, where you do it, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on, William. First time on the CBL podcast, but it's an honor to be with you. So I'm a pastor, church planter, but I guess after a while, you drop the church planter and you just say pastor. So I've been a church planter about 15 years ago. Pastor Christ the King Church now. We started in the inner city of Cincinnati and just recently moved across the river to Fort Thomas, Kentucky. And that's, just about 5 minutes from downtown Cincinnati. Been here for about 4 months. And that's a kind of a quick overview of who I am.
Okay, so church planter, now church pastor, in the Kentucky, Ohio region. You guys recently bought a building, right?
Yeah, we did. So it's crazy. I mean, we acquired the whole church reform initiative thing is relevant because we planted the church in 2010, and then 2 years in, there was a Southern Baptist church in our neighborhood that gave us their building, and the pastor just offered it to us free and clear. And that was our home until about four months ago. And we had planted a daughter church, but they were still part of us before they'd particularized. And another Southern Baptist church called us out of the blue and said, "Hey, we've got a building. Maybe you'd want to merge with us, or we'll give you the building." And so we did it again a second time. And the church we planted is in that location. So 2 different church buildings acquired. And then we just recently purchased the one that we're in now. It's a lot bigger, and we had to pay for this one. So I've thought about it a lot since that church reform initiative, hostile takeover kind of mentality has shown its ugly head, even in the SBC. And there's a good way to do it, and then there's bad ways to do it. But yeah, so we got the building that we're in now. We trusted God. We prayed. We needed a place to grow. The building we were in was too small. So we took a leap of faith and purchased the building. And it's been such a blessing. I get giddy every time I think about just how blessed we are and how thankful I am to have it.
Yeah, well, I think that this is a really important piece of the conversation. So for people who might not know what Michael Clary is referencing here, the Church Reform Initiative is an organization. It's a Christian nonprofit that was launched by former members of McLean Bible Church after there was a lot of major issues at McLean Bible Church. They did a whole documentary on it, The Real David Platt, Part 1 and Part 2, launched Church Reform Initiative. And what happened there was Platt came to McLean, and while McLean was constitutionally an independent, non-denominational church, behind the scenes, Platt and his cadre of enablers, both within the church and within the Southern Baptist Convention, led McLean into the SBC. That's a little bit of a different conversation than their most recent documentary about Faith Baptist Church Knightdale, which details how the Summit Church in the Raleigh, North Carolina area essentially tried to execute a hostile takeover of their campus. But in that broader conversation, I want to be clear that not every church merger, church building, acquisition is a bad thing. Some people have noted, Clary, and I don't know if you ever read it, but Nine Marks has this book, Church Planting is for Wimps, in which they talk about, instead of planting a church, why don't you go revitalize a dead or dying church that already has a building? In general, I want to say that principle is a good idea and it can be done well, but as we've seen, it can also be done poorly. Is that essentially what you're getting at here?
Yes, 100%. In both cases of the churches that were given to us for free, the churches voluntarily offered the churches to us. In the first case, they just said, they said, like, you take this building and we will continue meeting here. And there's like 6 people and they still meet in that building to this day. That was 12 years ago, an aging congregation, and there's half a dozen of them. And like, you all maintain the building, you own it, renovate it, do what you want, and give us a room in the building, and we'll just meet here for free. And so it was a great win-win for both of us. In the second situation, that church said, well, maybe we'll merge. Let's talk about that. And I was very upfront with them. And I said, a merger, in my experience, is unwise because you have a lot of history and culture that may not mesh. And so if you would like to proceed, what we'll do is we will shut down your entity. You will transfer the property and assets to Christ the King Church, and then your members can go through our membership class and join the new church. And I was like, this is what we will do. You decide if you want to, and they chose to do it. And there was no forcible action. It was just very clear. And they said, yeah, we want to do that. And some of those people are still members, and there's never been a problem. If you do it transparently up front and let everybody know what's going on, people know, well, things will change. There'll be different priorities. It's a new pastor, it's a new people. But if you pull the wool over their eyes, that's really hurtful. That's what's duplicitous and wrong. But if you just tell them, this is our plan, and you choose if you want to join in that with us or not, and it can be done well. I think when I saw the documentary, and there was smoke coming out of my ears at just the pastoral malpractice and how much those people were wounded in the process.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fundamentally different thing. Like going to essentially a dead church, a dying church, and saying you have a historical gospel witness in this neighborhood, and thank God for that. Whatever's happened here, obviously, that gospel witness light is fading, almost extinct. My church is growing. We could use the help. Can we do this together? We could use the building, like all up front, totally sort of like handshake above board, is fundamentally different than, say, a megachurch with multiple campuses already scalping out an independent. I mean, the thing with Faith Baptist Church Nightdale, people could be confused because you use the FBC Nightdale denotation to sort of shorten the name. It's not a First Baptist Church. It was Faith Baptist Church. It wasn't it wasn't a Southern Baptist Convention church. Here's Summit, one of the heaviest hitters in the SBC, sending a Trojan horse candidate into that church to sort of like, weaken the defenses and get them brought into their mega corporation of church families led by directional elders or whatever those are, as opposed to non-directional elders. So just totally different things. I think at some point, though, because this is a topic of conversation, be good to have somebody sort of tease out the differences here. Maybe a future article from you at Center for Baptist Leadership. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today, we're here to talk about another article of yours, which you wrote in sort of recap of the Southern Baptist Convention annual meeting in Dallas, which was a little over 3 weeks ago now. You wrote a great piece called The Status Quo Convention, 6 Takeaways from Dallas. You said reform efforts are gaining ground, but the platform still prevails. Here's why. And so we'll get into that piece. But Michael, you've been in the Southern Baptist Convention for a long time, and you allude to some of that history in there. So tell us a little bit about your history with the Southern Baptist Convention, your appreciation for it. And then as we were talking before we hopped on here, you gave me a little piece of interesting historical data. You came to the SBC like 15 years ago. Then you stopped coming to the annual meeting, even though you're part of the SBC, and now you've been back for 2 years. So just sort of give us your background there.
Sure. I was not raised Southern Baptist. I was raised, I appreciated there's a lot of independent Baptist churches, and that's more where I come from. But I was not raised in the Southern Baptist Convention. And it wasn't until I was on staff with Crew in Louisville that I first joined a Southern Baptist church. And I was excited to be in Louisville for Cru because I wanted to study at the Southern Seminary. And so it was a great situation for me. And I joined a Southern Baptist church there. And I helped plant a church in Louisville. And it was a Southern Baptist church. And that was where I first saw the kind of vision and a passion for church planting. And whenever I graduated, then I was sent out to plant a church in Cincinnati, and I've been Southern Baptist ever since. So Southern Baptist Church, Southern Baptist Seminary. I loved my experience there, and I've come to just develop such a deep affection for the Southern Baptist Convention that it took a little time because I was not familiar with it initially. But over the years, I've come to see and value it, and connecting with so many people, especially recently, I've just seen like people that are working for reform and seeing behind the curtain a bit some of the problems that we're trying to address has made me love it even more, because I see like, man, this is a collection of churches, the bride of Christ writ large, that is embattled a bit. So one of my first taste of convention was whenever I was a church planner with NAM, and that was the Send strategy was just rolling out. I was not part of the Send strategy. I predated that just a bit in the Nehemiah project, but they were rolling out Send, and inner city church plants or urban church plants are all the rage. And they're looking high and low for success stories. They're really wanting to promote this to rural churches. And so they're looking around, and I'm like, well, where do we have some church plants in the city that are experiencing some reasonable success? And they found me. And so they contacted me, say, hey, we'll fly you to New Orleans to the convention. And, we just want you to come and and record basically a commercial, tell your story, and talk about church planning and being in the city. And then you're here on our dime, enjoy New Orleans, and make a vacation of it with your wife. And so
wait a minute, I gotta have to stop you. You're just now telling me this for the first time. NAM is paying to fly pastors to the convention. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. There's no way we would have gone. We couldn't have afforded it. There's no way we could have gone were it not paid for. They paid for another trip to New York City, and if you want to hear about that, I could tell you that too. But they paid for this trip to New Orleans, and the one purpose was for me to put a bit of a face on urban church planning at the convention, and to record a video. And other than that, do what I want.
Were you signed up as a messenger?
I don't remember if I did not vote because I was so new. I had no idea, William. I mean, I'm a bit embarrassed to admit it, honestly. I had no idea what the main meeting was, what happened in there, what the votes were. I never stepped foot on the floor of the convention. I never saw it. I was just out in that little room where they had me record a video. And so I had no idea what was happening the whole time. I might have registered as a messenger. I probably did, but I didn't go in and vote on anything. I was totally clueless.
Yeah, no. Well, I don't think it's embarrassing. I mean, I think it's just like, this is a great insight into the system in many ways. And this was many years ago. When was it? What year was this?
This would have been probably 2012, 2013, right in that neighborhood.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, as we saw at the convention this year, we had around 10,000-ish messengers registered. But on some of these biggest votes, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, the law amendment vote, there were thousands of people who didn't even vote at all. So what were they doing? Just what you were doing, hanging out outside in the convention somewhere. So, yeah. Okay. So you did that, you came, and then you didn't come back until Indianapolis. Why not?
Because I was planning my church. I was pastoring my people and focused on local church work. And so I know we'll get into the taxonomy of the piece I wrote, but I was squarely in the normie camp. I was just a normie pastor. And what enabled me to do that was thinking, the Southern Baptist Convention, they're doing their thing. There are people that know what's going on, and they're paying attention. They're voting on stuff. And I could just sit back, plant my church, and reap the rewards and enjoy it. And it was only more recently that I started to, and recently is in the last 5 years or so, I started to more and more messaging got out from various sources, but people are saying, hey, there are big problems in the Southern Baptist Convention. And initially I resisted it. I was like, I'm sure, but I'm like, these guys are just blowhards. They're just looking for attention. But I'm sure it's fine. I mean, these are good guys. These are great guys. I went to Southern Seminary. I love these people, and I just trusted implicitly and naively, thinking that there's no problem. And so I didn't see the need to go. I didn't bother to go. And 3 years ago, I had already had my vacation planned. Otherwise, I would have gone. But then I was like, I am going to mark my calendar a year in advance. I'm going to be in Indianapolis. I want to be in Dallas. And unless the Lord providentially hinders me, my plan is as long as I'm kicking, I want to be at the convention. And I want to, if nothing else, be a pebble in the shoe as a reformer. But Lord willing, I see a lot of reason and hope for reform. And I'm sure we'll get into the particular issues, but I was just kind of out to lunch. And then the more I saw the problems, the more I saw the urgency that, hey, I have a duty here to be involved and to show up and to speak and to help bring reform.
Yeah. So, Michael, I just want to sort of dissect your brain in public here for a second, because I think that you really do in many ways epitomize the type of individual we need to reach if we're going to win on the issues that we think are fundamental issues that need to change in the Southern Baptist Convention for the good of the Southern Baptist Convention's gospel and church planting and evangelism missions for the 21st century. I mean, I really do believe we're sort of in this window here over the next decade that will determine whether or not the Southern Baptist Convention is faithful or even exists when the calendar changes to 2100, should the Lord tarry, right? Like, we're setting our trajectory for the 21st century right now. And you were somebody who was checked out, and now you're checked in. So what changed? Like, what was it that finally broke through? Because it makes me think, like, maybe 5 years ago, we wouldn't have been friends. Like, I would have given you a call and been like, hey, Michael, we got problems. And you'd be like, William, you're just fear-mongering. You're being a grievance grifter, an outrage artist. I'm fine here. But now we're doing this together. So, like, what was the first thing, if you can remember? And if you can't, that's fine. It could have just been compounding. We're like, oh, wait a minute. You go the video game meme where it's like you're sitting back and you're like, okay, now I'm locked in. Like, what was that? What was that first thing for you?
I would have to say the first thing that I can remember is just a visceral feeling of betrayal by Russell Moore. I went to church with Russell Moore at 9th and O Baptist Church in Louisville, and I think he was at other churches but at that time we were both at 9th and O together. I remember talking to him. I'd led worship when I was at the church, and it meant a lot to me to be like, hey, this guy that I respect, he's at my church. He preaches sometimes. I really value his ministry. I was a bit starstruck, honestly. I did a campus tour as a student, or as a prospective student. And they were walking us around, Norton Hall and different buildings on campus. And then as we rounded a corner outside, there was Russell Moore came, and it was just kind of the sudden, he's there by himself and there's a group of students. And he was just like, well, hello there. And his
did a shaft of sunlight shine down on him and song play in the background?
No, I was just like, oh, there he is. That's Russell Moore. Oh my gosh. And I was just like, I revered this man. And so I took his systematic theology class, and I was like, this guy helped me. And he would always talk about being a Mississippi Democrat. And in my naive mind, I was thinking, oh, he's talking about, his pre-Christian life before he really walked with Jesus. He was a crazy liberal Democrat. And I never connected the dots that he's still a Democrat. And that would clue me in that I just took it for granted as the student, just loving life at Southern Seminary and just being fed so well spiritually. And I'm like, everybody here is conservative. Everybody here loves Jesus. They love scripture. And I just took it for granted. And so I remember reading his patriarchy article, and I was like, man, like, this is a life-changing piece. I'm like, if I could just put my thoughts into words, that's what I would write. And then over the years, I'm like, he continually said things that undermined what he had written. And then on the floor of the convention a few years back, somebody challenged him on it. And he said something like, I disagree, or I think Russell Moore of 2015 was wrong. Something along those lines. He basically disavowed what he had said earlier. And then I was like, wait a minute, maybe he's not the good guy that I always assumed he was. And then I was like, oh my goodness, a lot of the guys that were I'm John Harris. Like when I first started listening to John Harris's podcast, I listened to a few episodes and I'm like, come on, John, like, why are you getting all twisted up about this stuff? You're making a mountain out of a molehill. And then I'm like, all these guys were right. And that was a light bulb in my mind. These guys are right. I was wrong. And so I've got a lot of learning to do, a lot of catching up to do. And so I'm hanging around on what would then be called, the discernment blogs and stuff like that all people at the time would make fun of. They're just like, oh, discernment bloggers, they're just blowhards and getting attention. I'm like, no, these guys are right. And they're actually doing good work. And they're actually part of a tradition of polemics. And so it just really kind of opened my eyes to things that I didn't see before. And that opened the door for connecting with a lot of people. And of course, at the same, a little bit of a sidebar here is that I was in Acts 29 at the same time, and I'm watching the exact same things play out at Acts 29. Russell Moore was one of our national conference speakers, and I loved him then whenever he was in Nashville at the Acts 29 conference. But I was seeing the exact same things play out in Acts 29. There is theological compromise, things that everybody said that we all agree on complementarianism, but what we're seeing in practice is anything but. And I'm like, what is going on? And it was just a rude awakening that the world is a lot darker than I thought. And I try to believe the best in people, try not to be overly pessimistic. But what I thought was a virtue of believing the best turned out to be a vice, that I was naive and foolish. And there are a lot of people who were pulling the wool over my eyes, and I was trusting a lot of leaders that I had no business trusting, simply because they had a big platform, and then they were propping one another up. They were all saying, these guys are great guys, you should listen to these guys. And so just that feeling of betrayal, it was very frustrating. I was very angry that I listened to you guys, I trusted you guys, I said things and ministered in ways that I learned from you, and now I am holding the line and you're the ones compromising. So I felt a bit fatherless, a bit orphaned. And then I found a new tribe of guys that would have before been the discernment blogger guys. But now I'm like, no, these are great guys. These are sharp, godly guys. Like, now I've connected with you. I've met you. We've been at different trips together, and I'm like, this is a good dude. This man is fighting for the right things. And there's a lot of guys like us. We just don't have the fame or the platform that the other guys do. So we have to work together. We have to amplify our message together. And there's been a real spirit of cooperation and camaraderie in the trenches as we're fighting for reform. Not because we're mean, not because we love tearing people down or just trying to pick fights to be mean. It's like, no, we love the bride of Christ. We love the Southern Baptist Convention. We see this as a gospel light, a powerhouse like the world has never seen before. And there is no way that this thing is going to go down in flames without a fight. So here we are.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right. So last thing on this, and let's get into your article, because I've seen a critique, and I want to kind of help lead you towards grounding what you're saying more in some like objective theological concerns and even sort of good governance concerns, and not just emotional concerns. So I'm not giving you a hard time, but it's like, so I've seen this response from people where they say, people like you and me now, Michael, we're just driven by resentment. Right. You're saying, oh, I felt betrayed. These people were a father figure to me. I have some of those similar experiences myself. And so they dismiss us because they're like, oh, these guys, they're just resentful, angry, fatherless young men. But that's sort of a gloss. And some of those feelings can be real. I'm certainly agree. It's like it is very tough when you sort of planted your flag with a group of guys in a theological world for many years, and then you realize that they're actually in a completely different position than where you thought you planted your flag. And so you have to wrestle with that. But Michael, you're not just a resentful, bitter guy who lost his initial father figures in the faith. You're a guy who has convictions, and you realize that fundamentally these people don't share the convictions that you thought that they had and that you had. Right. So some of those, give us just a couple more of like the theological concerns, the objective things where you realize we're actually not on the same page here and they're going in a bad direction.
Yeah, so I can give one example of the law amendment is a good example of this. So like I said, I ministered in inner city of Cincinnati, so it's like 4 or 5 blocks from the university. You've been to that old church building. It's very urban, very dense environment. I mean, it is the inner city in every way. And so you have a lot of liberal influence. Cincinnati Children's Hospital is just a few blocks away where they're doing gender transition stuff for children. I mean, this is the ethos that I'm in. And so as a guy of conviction, I would teach on sexuality, and I am patriarchal, or complementarian, whichever the nomenclature you prefer, but that's where I'm coming from. And I would teach on these things, and I would notice people would get very frustrated. They would get angry because they didn't understand it. But I'm like, well, one, this is scripture, so I have to stand on scripture, even when it's uncomfortable and when people oppose it. But it's not like I'm lobbing grenades at some guy across the country for being a compromiser. And I'm like, I am preaching this to my own people, and the brush fires and the frustration lands in my own living room. It lands in my house. My family is affected by the fallout from people wrestling with, disagreeing with, opposing, rejecting the word of God. And so the convictions, and the thing is, I learned these things at Southern Seminary. I was taught by leaders at Southern Seminary, professors, like, you lead with conviction, you stand on the word of God. All my heroes are like that. So I'm like, that's what I do. I am practicing what you told me to do. And so the convictions are what drives it. Now, whenever we say it's in the law amendment, to me, it seems like a very simple equation. Like, the Baptist Faith and Message says the office of pastor is limited to biblically qualified men. There's been some people playing fast and loose with that. They're obviously wanting to do workarounds and shortcuts to shoehorn women pastors in through various means. Let's clarify this, because this is what we've agreed to. We've agreed to certain rules. We're going to abide by our rules, because the money that we send into the cooperative program goes to entities that should abide by the rules that we've all agreed to. And then when I see people not playing by those rules, it's not a personal resentment. It's not like I just hate these guys and I'm looking to, like, a personal attack is selfish ambition and bitter jealousy, which James 1 says that's earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. I'm just preaching through this now. That's it's not a personal thing. It's not like we just hate people and just trying to, like, I just hate Russell Moore and I hate Tim Keller and I hate whoever. It's like, no, there are scriptural principles that God requires us to stand on. And if I want to sleep at night as a pastor with a clear conscience, I can do no other. And so it is not resentment. It is not personal. But it is a necessary entailment of our calling. And if we don't do it, then we're hirelings. We're not shepherds.
Yeah, well, that's well said. And I mean, and you've written obviously on God's good design for gender. You have that one book out. Do you have another book in the works right now?
Yeah, the book I have in the works is
Loser Theology.
The loser theology thing. Yeah.
No, that's great. And who's that coming out with?
Canon Press.
All right, excited for that, man. Do you know the release date of that yet?
I don't.
TBD.
They have a manuscript, so I've sent the first draft, but there's the development and the rounds of editing. Probably early next year would be my guess, spring of 26.
Okay, well, we're going down all these rabbit trails, and I was just thinking about what you went through with your church, and that would be a whole nother conversation for another time too. So we'll have to get you back. But you were there in Dallas. I think you wrote one of the best articles, sort of summarizing what happened in Dallas and what you saw there. You know, every year for me, after the Southern Baptist Convention annual meeting is my wife's family's beach week, immediately after in Bethany Beach, Delaware. And my wife and I were driving up. I got back home to North Carolina on Friday morning after the convention. I stayed through Thursday and then packed the car, loaded the family up. We're driving up. Stayed the night somewhere Friday. Then it's like Saturday, you sent it to me, and my 2.5-year-old is fussing pretty aggressively in the background. So my wife's trying to care for him while I'm driving. And then I get your article. I'm like, sweetie, we got to pull over. We have to pull over so we can switch, so I can edit this and get it up. It's that good. We got to get it out now. So here, I'm going to try to share my screen and we can pull this up and just sort of walk through it here. If I can get this to go here. All right. So can you see that, Michael, or no? Does it come
Yes,
up for
I
you?
can see it.
Okay. I mean, it's kind of small, but I think we'll have it reoriented. So let's see. So reform efforts are gaining ground, but the platform still prevails. So let's jump into this first sort of taxonomy. Everyone in the evangelical world loves taxonomies. Kevin DeYoung had his on how, 1 through 4 is on how we approach social justice and racial issues. Andy Naselli had one on Christian nationalism. You now are giving us one on the 4 main groups in the Southern Baptist Convention: the platform, the reformers, the loyalists, and the normies. So how did you come, where did these come from? Like, how did you realize, okay, we've got 4 groups going on here?
I don't know. I think when I was sitting in the convention in Dallas, I try to pay attention. I try to read the room, and I'm like, what do I see happening here? And try to think, fairly and charitably about everybody in the room and what do they want? What's their particular interest being there? And I think the loyalists was who I didn't have them at first when I first started throwing. I'm like, well, you got the platform, and then you've got your just everyday. I think you've been calling guys like this Billy Baptist, just ordinary Christian guys. But then you've got this group that I'm a part of, Center for Baptist Leadership, and is a vocal, energized, just wonderful, smart, godly group of guys. Those are the reformers. But I'm like, that doesn't quite cover everybody, because there are guys that aren't on the platform, but they're knowledgeable. And so I think I initially thought of them as the status quo guys or the business as usual guys. And then through some editing with other people that gave input, they said loyalist is a good label, and I think that was good because it helped unlock something. Loyalists, they maybe envy the platform. It's like they're not on the platform, but they're like wanting to play nice with the platform because they aspire to be there.
Yeah, you said that. So let's walk through them in the order we got them in the article. Just so the platform, you say, like, these are the guys who control the agenda, particularly the Southern Baptist Convention Executive Committee, Jeff Orge, Committee on Order of Business, which sets the schedule, very powerful. And I love your line here: don't forget the parliamentarians and the lawyers who have their own agenda. They're the ones controlling everything. And then you mentioned you thought it was a mixed bag. We thought Presley is clearly part of the platform, but he seemed like he did a fair job and didn't work against the reformers. So, what did you think of sort of Presley's moderation of the meeting?
He's folksy. He brings gravitas, but also some humor and levity at appropriate times. I think in terms of presentation, he did a very good job. There are decisions made in real time that you don't know how or why they're making those decisions and what constraints they're under. So I can't speak to the decisions made, but from an optics and just the user experience of the convention, I thought he did a very good job.
Yeah, and so the platform, though, here really, I think, was on clear display with Jeff Orge and his role as the president and CEO of the executive committee, because Clint's on record supporting the law amendment in particular. And, Clint, I think, has shown support for other various reform efforts. By process of deduction, Clint did not sign the letter of the previous presidents asking for the salvation of the ERLC. So we could sort of, assume by deduction Clint's with us on that. But then we saw the platform do things like what Jeff did in his opposition to the law amendment, warning against lawsuits, the executive committee's placement of the ERLC's booth, just sort of a use of power by the platform. And you said here, this year it appeared that other platform players were working against him. Is that sort of what you were referring to?
Yes. Yeah. So he's Clint Presley, the president, is not a dictator, and he is subject to, processes and rules that are outside of his control. So I felt like Clint Presley was. I felt like he did not, at the very least, he was not an opponent of the things that we were trying to push for. I would say I didn't sense that he was an advocate for or was a great benefit, like trying to fight for it. but I didn't feel like he was an opponent. And so I mean, fairness, that's good enough. I did feel like Jeff George, his speech from the platform was definitely a thumb on the scale. It was inappropriate. I don't know why he was permitted to speak, or even if that was in order. Perhaps it was, but he put his thumb on the scale to tip it away from the ERLC amendment, or I'm sorry, not the ERLC, the financial transparency and the law amendment. So the platform exercises incredible control because they're running the show.
Yeah. And it's just, this is something, this is a sort of a whipping horse of mine. But like, we need leaders who are conservative and unapologetic about wielding the power to secure conservative ends, because the people, or even if you don't want to use conservative liberal, it's like, here's an issue: financial transparency or the law amendment or the ERLC. Some people support it. Some people don't support it. The guys in power who don't support it are unashamedly using their power to secure the outcome they want. It's failure. We need leaders who are unashamedly using their power to secure the issue outcomes they want, these things success. And that's something I think we really need to grow in as we matriculate new Southern Baptist Convention leaders. So that's a platform. Okay, next is the reformers. And you say, you count yourself amongst this group. We're the ones who see the SBC slowly but surely heading over a cliff and are advocating for fixes and reforms to our theology, public witness, and internal convention operations. That would be good for us. So you're part of this group now. Tell us a little bit more about who this group is and who they represent.
I mean, it's really just a group of, as I experience it, it is a group of friends. Pastors, church leaders, lay people that we have, because of our advocacy and our care about the convention and the particular issues at hand, we have found each other through social media and other ways. We've just like, hey, like, this guy seems to think like me, and so we talk, and we've been able to stay in touch between the conventions. And the thing is like the SBC is. It is salvageable. It's not as though we're the United Methodists or something. It's like this SBC is on the whole, a conservative Baptist denomination that is faithful. But there are problems that need to be addressed, and the best time to fix a problem is before it is an absolute red alert nuclear crisis. I think we're approaching crisis points, but we're not there yet. And that's why I'm hopeful. So you have guys, the reformers, that are like, show us where the money is being spent. That's a very reasonable ask. Let's clarify our stand on women pastors and trust God with the result. That's a good, reasonable ask. The ERLC is our entity that we're paying for, but it seems to be working against our interest as Southern Baptist. That's a reasonable ask. So we're not scorched earth guys. We're not just trying to just burn it to the ground. We are asking for reasonable reforms, reasonable transparency and disclosure. And the guys that are fighting for it are normal, ordinary. We're not the big guys up on the stage. We're not the guys that have, 15,000 member churches. We're just regular pastors in the SBC. And I think we represent the majority of Southern Baptists. I think, like, just if you line them up to a man, the Southern Baptist pastors would be like, yeah, I agree with those positions, and that's who we're fighting for.
Right. And I think one of the issues there, and we'll get into it, is that while this reform camp, low R, not talking about soteriology, but reform within the convention operations, they're the awakened normies who are clued in now. And so the thesis here is, if we can clue in more normies, they'll join us to the point where we have numbers that can win the day. But reaching and activating those normies is an issue here. And there's other, that's really one of the biggest hurdles we have. So this one, I love it. The Loyalists, you say the Loyalists are individuals who support the platform in public debates on their entity-sponsored blogs. I wonder who that could be referring to. And as messengers from the floor. And you say they're loyal to the platform because they want to be the platform. Their highest aspiration in ministry is to become an SBC, quote, insider. Have you run into these people? Like I feel like when you're talking about this, it sounds like you're talking about people, what their goals are in life, maybe even it used to be you. I don't know. You seemed like you were kind of like a normie, you said, but what's the problem with the loyalists here?
This is the sort of thing where I don't really know these guys personally. Okay. It is, I know, human nature, and I know like inner ring is a thing. It's linked in the piece to C.S. Lewis writing about the allure of the inner ring, and the allure of the inner ring is a feature of every powerful group. People are going to be drawn to the center of power, the source of power, for reasons of control or reasons of status or any number of reasons, but that's where people want to be. So they're always there. And so more from a distance, based on what other people have written, their podcasts, things like that, what they say, it's pretty easy to sniff out that that's this guy. This guy is drawn to the power center, and so their incentive is to play nice with the power, and in the power center, the institutions by design are going to moderate. It's going to be resistant to change. And so these guys are going to be more status quo friendly. They're going to be resistant to change. And so I find them often on the other side of issues that I care about, but they want to claim adherence to those issues. They want to say, I'm complementarian, or I'm all for financial transparency. But for some procedural reason or for some legal reason, they're going to oppose it. That to me, it's a telltale sign of a loyalist.
Yeah, and you mentioned too that they're dispositionally committed to prioritizing tone over substance. It's like we sound too angry, too radical, too fundamentalist. I mean, that's on. We just saw this on play at the PCA General Assembly. I mean, we see it everywhere, right? It's like, I agree with what you said, I just don't like how you said it, which is potentially a fair critique. But at the end of the day, I find that often these people, no matter how nice you say it, if what you're saying threatens the power structure, they're actually just not going to be on board with you. You say they are the business as usual crowd, and for them, business is booming. And that's probably very true. So finally, we have the normies. So like these three, and one of the reasons I wanted to get you on and talk through this is because I think this is a dynamic at play, quite frankly, in every institution in general, in every Christian denomination for sure. You have people in power, the platform, whatever you want to call them. You have people who see issues and are advocating for change in an institution. Essentially, that change is often just, let's make sure the institution continues to stand firm on its founding commitments and serve its core constituency. You have the loyalists who want to be the next iteration of the platform. And then really 80%, 70% left over in every institution are just the people along for the ride, the normies. So you said you were a normie. So who are the normies, Michael?
These are the ordinary pastors who love their churches. They love their people. They love the gospel. They want to reach the lost. They believe in the scriptures. They want to preach the Bible. They want to teach a Sunday school class, lead small groups, shepherd people through troubled marriages, baptize people. That's what you want. That when I hear a pastor described that way, the way I just described a normie, that's the kind of pastor I want to take over this church whenever I die. That is the heart and soul of the Southern Baptist Convention. And so it's not an insult to call them a normie. It means that they're focused on the right thing, and the thing that enables them to focus on what they are doing is a trust for the institutions that are providing support. And the reformers are saying, well, we think there's reform needed to restore greater trust in in the institution and those entities. But the normie he just doesn't know, and I don't blame him. Who has the time to just go sniffing around? I'm like, I wonder if the SBC is spending my money the way that they should. They're not paying attention. It was Mike Law who just happened to note that there was a church in his neighborhood that had a woman pastor. Now, who trolls around another church's websites looking for women pastors? It's just like, no, we're going about our business. And normies are probably more high trust kind of people, because I mean, they're good godly people, and they trust others, so they're not suspicious. And the thing is, suspicion feels a little dirty. I don't like feeling suspicious about people. Whenever I have a sick feeling or a suspicious feeling about somebody, I feel gross. I don't like feeling like I don't trust that guy. I'm just like, man, that's not a pleasant feeling. And I think that's just a typical normie disposition. However, our scripture and the word of God, our theology tells us that, there's total depravity, there's corruption, there's sin. And so we don't have the luxury of being naive. We don't have the luxury of avoiding suspicion. We have to ask questions. And asking the question is not an accusation. It's not saying you are a heretic or you are a compromised, fraudster. It just means we have to have good accountability. That's what the reformers want. And the normies they just don't really see the need for it. And I can't say that I blame them.
Yeah. So I remember when we put this up, I was internally thinking, this is very kind of you, very charitable, dare I say winsome. And I might actually blame them a little bit. So let's beat this up for a second here, because what you're describing is how, in many ways, almost like, a prelapsarian state of the world, just total trust, if men were angels, we would have no need of government. And that applies not just to politics, but it also applies to Christian denominations and institutions. And when things are going well, you can skate by on sort of a high trust environment for institutional perpetuation. But eventually, sometimes the trust runs down and people don't realize it yet. That bank account is a lot lower than a lot of people thought it was. But fundamentally, when I think about the Southern Baptist Convention and the cooperative nature of this program, I mean, to me, if you send a check to the SBC as a Christian, as a pastor representing your congregation, by giving them that money, you accept the responsibility of being clued in. I mean, do you agree with that or disagree with that? Because I would say, I would actually say my sort of challenge to the normies would be the fact that you send money from your congregants means you actually have a responsibility before God and before them to know what's going on. And maybe you felt like you could check out for the last 10, 15 years on it, but we're telling you maybe you shouldn't have done that at all, and you definitely can't do it now. Am I being too harsh?
I don't think you're being too harsh. So I'd say there's a range. So, there's like audit level detail that is not realistic to ask for or to expect every pastor to look into that. And then there is, I'm just going to take your word for it and never ask a question. So if those are the two extremes that we say both of those are, neither one of those is good, then like, okay, then there's some degree of investigation that is required. And even then we have to, you'd have to be able to read spreadsheets and budgets and know it's like, okay, at a certain scale. So like, my church, our budget's like $500,000 a year. And so I know what numbers look like at this scale. Whenever you scale it up to the size of the cooperative program and you see $1 million, they spend $1 million on, I don't know, name tags or something. It's like, that just seems outrageous. But I'm like, but I don't know what it costs to buy name tags at that scale. So there is some reasonable, understandable ignorance on behalf of the normies. And so for guys like that, and I count myself among them, you need to have people like Rhett Burns, who does understand finance and can operate finance at scale, to say, hey guys, there's a problem here. And I'm going to take his word for it because he knows this better than me. There's no zero trust environment that's good. And there's no total trust environment that's good. We have to have some degree of, I want to trust you to a point. I can't trust you fully, but I can't, I have to have some trust for us to be able to do work together at all. And what is that level of trust is going to be different from man to man. And it's going to be negotiable based on circumstances. I think your point is accurate that we have been too trusting. And I mean, it's one of my biggest flaws, William, in ministry. It's like I tend to be too trusting, and it's served me well at times. It helps me to relate to people, and it's burned me at times because I trust too quickly. And And I think probably a lot of pastors are like me. That's why I relate to these people.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's very fair. I think one of the words that I would use, so in between no trust and total trust, I think the biblical word is actually stewardship, right? I would say it's ownership. And I've used the phrase extreme ownership sometimes, and that sounds like aggressive. That's like I think like a venture capital firm term or something. but really, but I mean, it's a good way to think about your life. As a man, like taking extreme ownership of your life, ordering your life. Doing what you can in your control. I mean, this is interesting. My pastor and I, we've talked about this, and we, my pastor is published with Center for Baptist Leadership. When he came back from the SBC this year, I was at the beach, but the first thing he said to the church was, we need to send more messengers. My small Southern Baptist church could have sent like 9 messengers the year before, maybe like 7 or 8 this year. And we're a small church and we only sent 3 this year. And he was like, we've got to send more messengers. So it's like the point there about extreme ownership is like, if I'm asking you to do something, I need to do it myself. If I'm saying your church needs to send more messengers, my church needs to send more messengers. But really the biblical term, I think, is stewardship. It's like, to the normies listening to this, I'm not asking you, Center for Baptist Leadership is not asking you to think about the SBC every day or even every week, right? Faithfully pastor your church, care for, do hospital ministry, do graveside ministry, do all the ministry you need to do, be emotionally invested. This is another thing too. I don't mean to go off on too many trails, but it's like people need to learn how to be committed to reform work without being emotionally invested in it, right? Like you can care about doing the things that need to be done without like putting your heart and your soul into it in such a way that you're completely defeated when it doesn't go your way. But just, I'm asking for more stewardship. Like if you're going to send the money, just like tune in a little bit more, like 5% more, start planning a little bit more in advance, maybe a few more months in advance, asking your church to send the messengers. And that's kind of and I think you're doing that now too, right? Like you've kind of gone from a normie to a reformer by dialing up your stewardship of the Southern Baptist Convention. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, great. Well, all right. So platform, normies, loyalists sort of work together to beat the reformers. That's sort of how you summarize this, because the normies show up with a high degree of trust. And then you just have somebody like Rhett Burns. Hey, who's this pastor from South Carolina? He seems like a nice guy. I don't know him. But the president of the executive committee is telling me all these terrible things would happen if we do what this guy said. So I'm going to defer to that guy. And you're saying that system needs to change a little bit.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Well, so I hope that was helpful. But then the last thing I want to talk about with you here from this article, there's more in here, is this second point you make: the SBC annual meeting as a massive advertising campaign. And I'm gonna get us out of the article and just let us talk about this. But I thought this was such an insightful point you made, Michael, and this is why I love your writing. This is very Aaron Renn-esque in my opinion, and I mean that as a compliment, right? It's like you're taking it all in and you're saying that in many ways the convention is like a giant commercial for itself. You had this great line. You said, where 10,000 Baptists are gathered in Jesus' name, advertisers will be in their midst. And I'm not talking about advertising from sponsors outside the convention. I'm talking about the convention advertising itself to messengers. And essentially you argue that the cooperative program is the product being sold to the convention, and we are the consumers. So I'm going to get us out of the screen and just let you talk about this, because I thought that this was, just such a great, great insight. So when did that hit you? That it's like, I'm being sold something. I'm being sold the cooperative program. This is one big advertising campaign. I'm the consumer. And then you have some very insightful, like downstream, articulations of what that means in terms of, well, if I'm selling a product, everything needs to be great. And if something is wrong, the product won't sell. So we're going to downplay problems, upsell, everything is fine. Just walk us through that, man. It was great.
Yeah, thank you. That was one of the last things that clicked into place for me. But it is actually, I put it early in the piece because I saw that as more of a driver of the other observations than a result of it. And so I noticed so some of the guys I was sitting around and chatting with, they were like, why are we spending all this time? It's like, you have 48 hours to do business with 10,000 people. You want to max out every second that you're there to get the most work done. But we're hearing a lot of fluffy stuff, and we're singing these long worship sets, and there's a lot of performative kind of things happening on the stage. And I was like, why aren't we doing more business? This is precious minutes that's being eaten up. And I know if you say that, people say, don't you like to worship God? What's the matter with you? I'm like, well, we could worship God through doing business too. So I saw that was a little strange. And then there was a bit of a happy clappy kind of attitude throughout, which evangelicals generally are. We're prone to this, just kind of the Lego movie. Everything is awesome all the time. Everything is awesome. That's what I was hearing. And some people would ask for the sale. I mean, I used to work in sales. And so you would ask for the sale. So I used to sell computers, and somebody's looking at a computer and a husband looking at his wife. Like, would you like me to box that up for you? Or would you like me to ring that out for you? And you ask for the sale. And I'm like, they were doing that. Some of them. So I mentioned this in the piece. Some were very overt. It's like, please continue supporting Southern Baptist causes with cooperative program dollars. And then others were a little bit more subtle, and they would say, this is what your cooperative program dollars are doing. This is that money at work for you. And it just hit me, and I'm like, we're being sold a product. And then it all made sense, because you don't want, when you're advertising, you're not trying to be fair. You're not saying, hey, here's the good things, here's the bad things. Here's where the Presbyterians might have a point. Here's what the Catholics are good at. No, I am selling my product, and I'm giving you only the highlights, none of the negatives. And that is 2 days of the SBC convention. The only time there's a chink in the armor is when the floor is open for discussion. And that's when the reformers step up to the mic. And of course, those guys are the ones highlighting negatives and complaints and concerns that need to be addressed. And if the convention is a commercial to keep the money flowing into the cooperative program, then those guys are like bad reviews on your product on Amazon. That's a 1-star review or a 2-star review, and that drives down your ratings, and that makes your product look less dependable, trustworthy, or valuable. And so the platform, who is funded by the cooperative program dollars and who controls all the messaging, they obviously have an incentive to make sure that only negative PR is, positive PR is maxed out and negative PR is kept to a minimum.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hadn't thought about that myself in terms of the Southern Baptist Convention yet. And it just rings so true. It's like one of those things where it's like, as soon as you say it, it's like, absolutely, this is what's happening. I mean, you even look at how, like, we do the seminary reports, the entity reports, right? It's like they monopolize the stage. They get to talk about all the wonderful things that they're doing. And then if they get any hard questions, I mean, Leatherwood did this with John Whitehead's question about the ERLC's explicit support for Ukraine military funding, which was obviously, going further than the resolution we had passed on supporting peace in Ukraine and Russia. And he just filibustered the whole thing out. Like, there's no honest engagement with any critiques. And it's like, man, that's because they're selling. The Southern Baptist Convention is selling itself, the cooperative program, the funding engine. Each of the entities are selling themselves. Come to our seminary, go do missions with us, plant churches with us. It just strikes me, though, as very, like, unchristian, Michael. Like, it's like, it seems quite like I do wonder this, if Paul the Apostle, the father of modern missions, right, in many ways, the guy who got all these churches to support him by telling them, terrible things about how they ran their churches. You guys are doing terrible. Let me write you 2 letters correcting you. I'm in chains. I almost died. The supporters you sent along with me, they almost died too. It's like, if Paul could visit the Southern Baptist Convention and see this is how we're doing, like, international missions and church planting now, I just wonder what he would think of it. I don't know. Thoughts on that?
Well, we are averse to bad news. And whenever you're embattled and you feel like, hey, like, the baptisms are down, church membership's down, cooperative program giving is down, it's like there's a reaction of fear. that makes you want to avoid any further bad news because you feel like you're hemorrhaging because of bad news, when in reality you're hemorrhaging because of other factors, and the way to address them is to deal with the bad news. And so anytime you're like any leadership crisis, the first step in resolving it is facing the crisis head on. I'm like, okay, what is the problem here? And so if you don't address the problem, then if you're not even acknowledging the problem, then you're never going to address the problem. And you're just putting a Band-Aid on it with a little happy smiley face sticker, but you're not really dealing with it. And so I would find it much more refreshing. I mean, honestly, I don't think that I'm weird about this. I think most people would find it refreshing if somebody, one of the entity heads, like, okay, listen, we've got some problems, and I want to shoot you straight. And I think here are the four biggest things that I think are challenges in the convention, and not just the stuff that everybody says. We need more soul winning. We need more baptisms. Talk about the real things that we can address within our control. I think people would warm to that. They would appreciate it. They'd think, okay, now I trust that guy. I trust the guy that tells me honestly the problems we face, not the guy that says we have no problems. And so we have to be willing to deal with real problems. And what's odd, William, and I'm just thinking of this in real time. I don't know exactly where to put this in my mind, but we have dealt with other problems that I don't see as the actual problem. And so we've had racism in the SBC or sex abuse in the SBC. And I'm like, yes, those things happen. Are those the real problem? It seems like maybe that's there. We'll kind of tip our hat to it by inventing boogeyman problems so that we can put on a show of dealing with problems when a bigger and more urgent problem, a crisis, is staring us in the face that we're unwilling to deal with.
Yeah, so I think one of the crises that's staring us in the face right now as Baptists is really, will we be Baptists or not? We just published a great article from Bethany Miller. She actually she's a lay member, young woman at Eric Reed's church, the Journey Church in Lebanon, Tennessee, about reclaiming Baptist identity in a non-denominational age. And, I think that really gets at the heart of the main thing facing us as Southern Baptists is, will we be the Southern Baptist Convention holding fast to our Baptist distinctives and beliefs, or will we be the general evangelical non-denominational convention, going forward? Because so much of it, I think, is like the worship of numbers, right? It's like we just want big numbers, big money flowing in, big churches being planted, big missionaries being sent. And what happens if we're just Baptist? I think that's the crisis that's facing us. And to be honest about that, I think means that we, at some point, our big tent actually has to have firm lines. Not everybody is a possible Baptist. Not everybody who wants to send us money can do things with us. I mean, look what's happening in Baylor. This is fascinating. I had some conversations. I'm going to keep this really, really vague to protect everybody off. I had some conversations with people asking about like problems with the liberal Baptist conventions. And I've had a lot of these, so this could be anybody. Virginia and Texas had these liberal Baptist conventions, right? And they also, there's a conservative one, there's a liberal one. They work with the Southern Baptist Convention. Baylor is part of that BGCT, the Baptist General Convention of Texas. I think they still get money from them. And they just took a bunch of money to study like LGBT and women's issues. Fascinating how they connected them. We've been saying they're connected. Well, here they're admitting that they are. And I saw a guy, this is public, so I'll use this name, Jared Cornut, who is no reformer, who I'd say very much is a loyalist. He had a tweet saying, Southern Baptists in Texas, part of the BGCT, make sure to sequester your giving so that none of it goes to Baylor, because they're, out and out waving the rainbow pride flag now. I'm like, dude, we could have made that determination a lot earlier down the slippery slope than here, right? I mean, that's what it's going to take eventually. But like, we need to be smart about our giving, and at some point we have to draw these lines, right? Like, we are going to be Baptist or be nothing. And I think that's the biggest crisis facing us in many ways. But man, I think that was a great insight, brother. So thank you for your work on this article. To kind of get us to the end, a couple more final questions. what's it going to take going forward? Like, what will, your message to the normies, who you were and who you are at heart? How can we get more normies on board with honestly speaking to and addressing issues in the Southern Baptist Convention to get us back on track?
Two things come to mind right away. One is mobilization and one is education. So we do represent the majority, William. The Center for Baptist Leadership, they, regardless of what people may think about a particular article or this or that on the website, we represent, I think, the historical traditions of the SBC and the ordinary Baptist pastor and church and lay member. So it's not a matter of making the argument. We've won the arguments. I mean, honestly, like nobody is able to make substantive, compelling arguments to oppose the law amendment or financial transparency or to retain the ERLC. So we've won the arguments. It's not about arguments. It's about making sure that ordinary people, ordinary normie type pastors and messengers are up to speed and can detect what's happening in the room. And so as a newcomer to the convention the last couple of years, newcomer to the annual meeting of the convention, there's a lot of things in the room that I'm like, I'm not sure what's happening right now. We've got a motion and an amendment and then a motion within an amendment. And then there's a point of order. I'm like, what's happening? It's easy to get lost. And then in those moments, you're very susceptible to emotional manipulation. I'm like, I'm not sure what to do, but I look around and I see all these hands going up. So I guess I'm just going to go with the crowd. So there's a need for people to be educated, not on the substance of the issues or the principles behind them. I think we've made those cases and we have the right arguments. But I think if there is how does that principle or that argument apply in this particular issue on this particular motion being made? And that's when you have to understand the politics of it, the machinery, the way that the parliamentary procedures are being manipulated. And that's hard to do. And so I think there's a threshold of education that needs to be met across the board, or at least to a greater degree, and then turnout. Getting as many messengers there. I don't care. Like if we just increase turnout per capita across the board, we win because there's more of us. We have greater numbers than the opposition.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. We've at the end of the day, we don't need better arguments, although we could always have better arguments. We need better numbers. To get the better numbers, we need to reach the normies and get them to tune in. It's like, hey, 5% more, a little bit more stewardship. So hopefully you'll join us in working to find and activate those people, regionally, wherever they can be. I think I'll say this now. I'm working on something. I think we need about 100 committed Southern Baptist pastors who will sign up to say, I'm going to work to recruit 50 additional messengers from my region, from my area. That could include a church that has sent 2, but could send more. So you get them to send 5 this year. That's +3. That could be a church that sent none. Now they send 3 or 4. That's +3. That's +4. I think if we can find 100 more or less, that's a nice, easy number of pastors like yourself who will say, you know what, I'm going to give a couple hours a week to reach these people and encourage them to come. That's really what we need, I think, for Orlando. Look, Jonathan Howe and I don't agree on a lot of things. I think he's one of the most powerful bureaucrats in the Southern Baptist Convention in his perch as the executive committee. But he wrote a good piece saying he wants to see more churches in Orlando. He wants to see 5,000 churches represented in Orlando. We had less than 4,000 churches in Dallas. We had less than 4,000 churches in Indianapolis. That's less than 10% of the total number of churches in the Southern Baptist Convention. So if you are not coming to our annual meeting, just really rough math goes like this. If you're not coming to the annual meeting, one Baptist is making decisions for 9 other Baptist churches, right? It's 1 out of 10 at best in terms of churches, not even in terms of total numbers, but churches. Less than 1 out of 10 churches is represented. So got to reach those people. Michael, one question I like to always ask pastors who join us is tell us something that's encouraging. I usually do it at the beginning. We'll do it at the end here. Tell us something encouraging that you see the Lord doing in your ministry at Christ the King Church.
Only get one, huh?
Oh, yo, shit, yeah, if you got, hey, man, most people only have one. I'm just kidding. Tell us what you want to.
Well, I can connect this to broader cultural trends, William. What encourages me the most is I am seeing, because of our context being close to a university, we've always skewed young, as church plants often do. And so I've been able to get a glimpse at the emerging generations. And I've always it's always been an assumption that each generation ticks a little bit to the left of the one before, and then a little bit left of the one before. And that's been happening for quite some time. And this young generation that's coming up now that's my kids and their friends. And I'm seeing this around the country. It's not just here. They're passionate for order and for loyalty and for patriotism and for scripture, structure, for heritage, all the things that have slowly eroded and that we've let go and forsaken in previous generations. They want it all back because they're like, what we've lost, it's chaos. It's led to chaos. And so there's a hunger for it. And so the things that we talk about, the things that we publish at CBL and talk about on your podcast, the things that are part of the political movement that we are both part of, the MAGA and patriotism and Make America Great, all of these things are indicators of cultural trends where people are like, they're hungry for something and they're seeing the hellscape that secularism and liberalism and empty soulless Christianity, Christless Christianity has produced. And they're like, they don't want that. It's a little bit terrifying for them. And so there's an opportunity here where we're able to seize on that longing and that passion and energy. And there's a ton of excitement. I mean, we're watching politically the death of liberalism. And that is, it's like, bury it 20 feet below the surface of the earth, like kill it. It's a cancer. And there's a corollary we're seeing in the church where there's a hunger for doctrine, tradition, deep theology, scripture, long sermons. We're seeing mega churches and just this empty, shallow Christianity. It's flaming out. And so, my church, we're fairly traditional. We're very conservative, and the energy and the momentum is sky high. People love it. And it's not because we've discovered some new innovative formula. It's because we're doing old school traditional things. We have hymnals in our pews. Every once in a while, we'll bust those out. I mean, it's like, that's what I'm seeing in the new generation. And that thrills my heart. That gives me hope for the future. And it gives me hope for the Southern Baptist Convention, because I'm like, the next generation is more conservative than this one. And that's really exciting.
Amen. Yeah, I know. I mean, people think I'm radical. I'm like, you don't know what's coming. Like the next generation thinks I'm a big squish, which
think I'm a squish,
which that just brings me great joy. So last thing too here, you said you were not so discouraged leaving the convention this year. And I just want you to reiterate that for our listeners. I actually wasn't either. I was more discouraged leaving Indianapolis with the second, the loss of the law amendment on that second vote than I was leaving Dallas this year. I was actually like really encouraged leaving Dallas this year. The number of pastors coming up, thanking us for our work, wanting to be involved was just, exponentially higher than the year before. But tell us why you're encouraged and not discouraged.
Well, it's because I've come to see that this is not it's not a one and done thing. Good things are hard to build and easy to destroy, and we're trying to build something, and we're trying to rebuild something that is in decline and struggling, and that takes a lot of work. And so the conservative resurgence wasn't a 1 year, one and done vote. It was a decade-long campaign, concerted effort, tireless effort. And so last year, I was very discouraged after ND. I had people saying, you're going to get out, you're going to get out, you're going to leave. And I'm like, no, we're not going to go anywhere. This year, I'm like, okay, we know I got what I was hopeful for more, but I didn't expect a whole lot different than what we got. And so I'm not all that disappointed. I'm like, this is a multi-year campaign, and I do believe we're gaining ground, because every year that goes by, more people were making the arguments again, and the antics of the platform get a little bit more desperate. I mean, what Jeff Ward said in his 2 different speeches, I was like, thinking rational people are not buying these arguments. But they're enough to sway the room in the moment. But like, you keep doing this, and it's like, we'll keep coming back. We'll keep coming back for women pastor, the law amendment type of work, financial transparency. We're not giving up on these things, and we'll keep chipping away. We'll keep making our argument, and eventually, I do think we'll prevail. But it's not. We're not going to win it all with one convention. It's going to take a long time. So I'm encouraged. I'm like, more people are getting on board. We're meeting more people. Our numbers are growing. CBL is doing great work. You're doing great work. A lot of people are like hearing your name. You hung out in the stinking White House, for crying out loud, with the president. I'm like we're making some noise, and I see every reason to be optimistic for the future. But it is a long plan that we have to implement.
Amen. Low expectations, a high threshold for endurance. I would say that that's 2 kind of key features you need for multi-year institutional reform efforts. Michael, thank you for your time. I know you got to get going for some 4th of July festivities. Where can people find you? Give us the whole suite: your personal work, your Substack, King's Domain Conference, your church. Tell us where we can learn more and get more from the mind of Michael Clary.
I've tried to funnel it all into Substack, which is michaelclary.com. And so I publish there. Like anything I publish anywhere, I just try to post it there too. I use dmichaelclary.com. Please subscribe there, and I publish there once or twice, or every week or 2. And then on Twitter, same thing, Michael Clary, at Michael Clary. I'll write on Facebook. I'm a little bit more cautious with Facebook, because people can be nasty on Facebook. Twitter's a lot more, or X is a lot more pleasant experience for me than Facebook sometimes. But Michael Clary on Facebook. I have a podcast, Plain Speech podcast, that I do myself. The Current Reality podcast I do with an associate pastor, Wade Thomas, at my church. And I'm pastor at Christ the King Church. And we started a ministry called King's Domain, and we do a conference, and like our podcast and all that is kind of under the umbrella of King's Domain, and that's kings-domain.com. And the conference we did just this last year, all the talks are now available on the website, and you can also find them on YouTube and Spotify and those places. Just look for King's Domain, and all that content is there. So put a lot of content out there, but Substack is really the place where I try to kind of combine it all and funnel it all to that one location.
All right, fantastic. Well, I really appreciate your work, brother. If you're in the area, please consider visiting Christ the King Church. Please visit Michael Clary's Substack, read and learn from him. Check out the recent great conference talks from the King's Domain Conference. Michael, such an encouragement to me, brother. It's a blessing and a privilege to have this conversation. Thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you, William.
All right, I'm gonna play us out here, so hang tight for a second.
The Center for Baptist Leadership podcast is powered by American Reformer, hosted by William Wolfe, with audio production by Jared Cummings. Our music is a custom remix of Soldiers of Christ in Truth Arrayed, the official hymn of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. To help CBL reform and revitalize Christian institutions, please consider making a generous donation today at centerforbaptistleadership.org.